Healthy bonding versus trauma bonding. Healthy bonding. Healthy bonding is when bonds between two people are formed based on dignity and respect, as well as open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. Healthy bonds tend to start forming between two people when there is either empathy or similarities present, as we all tend to be drawn to people who are either like us or that we can relate to in some way. However, if both people are tolerant of differences and seek to understand one another's point of view, then healthy bonds can be forged over any topic or situation if the foundation of dignity and respect is present. Healthy bonds grow deeper, stronger, and more empowering, fulfilling, and nourishing with time. Trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is an unhealthy bond between an emotional manipulator and their target, and they are formed by the highs and lows that make up an abusive relationship. They occur as the result of ongoing intermittent reinforcement of reward and punishment, and are forged due to emotional wounding and a psychological defense, so that person can try to convince themselves that they can stay safe and sane in an environment that is neither safe nor sane. Trauma bonds are a one-sided bond and are not based on dignity, respect, and are instead based on misplaced empathy and similarities. The target assigns the qualities of empathy and morality to the trauma-causing person, who is not demonstrating either of these qualities. There is no ongoing, open, honest, sincere, or solutions-oriented communication, and the emotional manipulator is not sincerely motivated to work as a team, but instead is motivated to work out of his own best interests, which is often at the expense of others around him, especially those who are trauma bonded to him. Trauma bonds are best seen by those who are not emotionally invested in the situation, because to those who are not in the situation, they can generally see the situation as dangerous and destructive, and so the target's defense of their abuser seems illogical, bizarre, frustrating, exhausting, and destructive, which it is. An interesting point to realize is that those who are trauma bonded to someone often feel that their connection to this person is also illogical, bizarre, frustrating, exhausting, and destructive, and get upset with themselves for continuing to go back or for feeling so pulled in by this person. Trauma bonds also grow deeper and stronger with time. However, they become more disempowering, destructive, diminishing, and dangerous over time. News story. When I was with my ex, I continually felt uncertain, insecure, and always on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I found myself walking on eggshells and trying so hard to prove my love to him with the hopes he'd eventually treat me right. I confused feeling this intensely toward him with love. It wasn't. It was a trauma bond. I am now married to a wonderful man who is one of my best friends. Our bond is based on treating each other with dignity and respect, as well as our mutual enjoyment of each other's company. We both really like each other for who we are, and if either of us has an issue, we know we can talk about it. The way I feel in this relationship is so nice. It's like I can breathe and relax and be myself. I don't know how I ever put up with anything less. Nikki. Normal versus healthy. Normal. What's considered normal is often different degrees of dysfunction. Healthy. The foundation of a healthy dynamic includes mutual trust and support, as well as being treated with dignity and respect, and having open, honest, sincere, and solutions-oriented communication. But keep in mind, this is only the foundation. What's healthy for you is something that only you can determine, and that comes from getting to know yourself well enough that you realize what is empowering and nourishing for you. News story. When I began dating after several years of being out of an abusive marriage, I had a hard time sorting out what was normal and what was problematic. I made the mistake of looking around at my friends' marriages or relationships and using them as a guide as to what was normal. It took my dating several men who did similar things to what my friends' husbands did, such as drinking a lot, yelling, or cussing, for me to realize that while that might be normal for them, it wasn't what I wanted in my life. I had to turn inward and figure out for myself what I wanted and didn't want in my life, and use that as the measuring stick for what I was looking for, and not to look at what everyone else was doing. Patricia. Caring versus controlling. Caring. Caring about someone means that you are concerned about them, what's in their best interest, and you empower and encourage them to become their personal best. Controlling. Controlling someone has nothing to do with caring about another person. It stems from the controlling person's need to dominate and their need to be in control over every aspect of their lives, including their partner. In an abusive relationship, controlling behavior may come across to the target and to others as concern for the target and what's in their best interest, but it's not. To many targets, a controlling partner can seem like a concerned parent, which can seem comforting, especially if a person either grew up without a parent in their life or if they had a domineering parent in their life. Control is about domination, and it's about getting and keeping power over the other person. Some examples of controlling behavior that can come across as caring, especially when the target first starts dating an abusive person, are continually texting a person while they are out with friends or family and insisting that the target gets back to them right away, showing up uninvited or unannounced to the target's work, home, or when they are out with friends, demanding to know where the target is and when they'll be back, insisting their partner dress a certain way and shaming them if they don't, planting seeds of insecurity about their appearance or intelligence, planting seeds of jealousy and alluding to how many other people are trying to date them with the ultimate goal of the target working harder to earn or win their loyalty, love, affection, attention, or time. Telling the target that if they loved them, they would act a certain way, such as change their appearance. Accusing the target of sleeping with coworkers or with other people if they are doing things without the abuser. Monitoring how much money they spend or putting them on an allowance. Demanding that the target not spend time with certain friends of family that they are or were close to. Using intense statements such as no one else can have you. You are mine. You are my whole world. All I need is you. I would kill for you. I would kill you if you ever left me, or I'd kill myself if you ever left. Abusive people will rarely have sincere accountability or remorse for their actions because they feel justified in what they are doing. Because of this, they always have an excuse for everything, especially their controlling and abusive behavior. So they might say that they don't want their target to talk to certain friends because those friends are a bad influence on their target, which generally means these certain people see the abusive or manipulative behavior for what it is and are encouraging the person to leave. Or they may yell, belittle, or hit their target, but then claim that the target made them do it. Controlling behavior tends to come across as feelings of being smothered, micromanaged, and exhausted, as if you have to continually walk on eggshells, or as though everything you do is wrong. Over time, walking on eggshells can lead to a whole host of other issues, including anxiety, depression, low or no self-esteem, loss of identity, loss of independent thought or decision-making, substance abuse, fatigue, pain, inflammation, digestion issues, weight gain or loss, and a whole host of other physical ailments. I want to stop for a moment and address a very important point. Because an abusive person always thinks they are right, it is not uncommon for them to use every tool out there to get their target to comply. They may use friends, family, co-workers, the police, therapists, and self-help, or relationship books to push the target into being what they want them to be. With self-help or relationship books, they may highlight passages or insist that they each read the book, and use examples like I gave above against the target. This is a very dangerous form of gaslighting, and regardless of whether this gaslighting is intentional or unintentional, it really shows the depth of their problematic thinking, and that they are very far away from changing. So don't confuse activity, therapy, reading self-help books, going to relationship retreats, etc., with productivity, true change. The abuser will generally have an issue with any boundary the target tries to set, and may insist that the target is being controlling, manipulative, and abusive if they have an issue with their behavior or with how they are being treated. Here is the same example and how it can be manipulated by the abuser and confusing to the target. Sarah is not okay with John messaging women on Facebook or meeting up with women that he's slept with or dated in the past. He often hides his phone when he's on it and sleeps with it under his pillow. She mentions her concerns to him, and he claims that these women are all friends and that Sarah is jealous and controlling. John then suggests that they go to couples therapy, as well as read some relationship books together. He manipulates the therapist into thinking that he is a good guy who just happens to have female friends and that he loves Sarah but hates her trust issues. Sarah tries to explain her reasons for her concern but feels that her examples come across as her being petty and immature, and she begins to wonder if perhaps she really is the one with the problem. Their therapist recommends that they read some relationship books together, and they do. During this time, John skews what is in the books to meet his agenda, which is to make Sarah the problem. Sarah feels like she can't argue with what's written on the page, and because she wants the relationship to work, she reluctantly agrees to stop bringing up issues she has with John's squirrely behavior. The point I'm trying to make with this is that context matters. Having friends of the opposite sex isn't necessarily the problem. But texting strangers and hanging out alone with an ex, especially if there seems to be feelings still there, is a problem. Sarah isn't being controlling by having a problem with John hiding his phone and meeting up with women she doesn't know about or that he has a sexual past with. John is being wildly inappropriate by expecting her not to have an issue with this, especially when all of his behavior, hiding his phone, etc., points to the fact that he actually does have something to hide. A normal person with platonic friends does hide what they are doing. They are okay going out in groups. Oh, I'm sorry. That's supposed to be doesn't. A normal person with platonic friends doesn't hide what they are doing. They're okay going out in groups, and they introduce their partner to their friends. Please don't do what so many of us have and think that you need to stay in a relationship with a person who has perpetually confusing behavior, thinking that you need concrete proof that they are, in fact, abusive or cheating. Any relationship that is controlling, crazy-making, or perpetually critical or crazy-making is not worth being in, because you are being manipulated. A relationship built on mental anguish, deceit, and dominance isn't a relationship. This is not love. This is a trauma bond. And feeling like you are losing your mind or trying to convince yourself that you need to trust a person who has continually proven to you that they can't be trusted is a big sign that you are in an emotionally and psychologically abusive relationship. New story. When we first began dating, he would insist that I text him when I woke up in the morning, when I went to lunch, when I got off of work, and when I got home. He always wanted to know who I was out with and what I was wearing. I'd never had attention like this before, and I thought he was so caring. My friends thought he was controlling, and I thought they were just jealous, so I stopped talking to them about my relationship, and over time we grew apart. Over time, he had more and more demands. He wanted me to stop going to college because he felt it was a waste of money, and began telling me I was stupid. He wanted me to change how I dressed because he thought I looked too sexy. My life was all about walking on eggshells trying to please him, but it was never enough. I walked around feeling anxious and avoiding bringing up anything I knew he'd disagree with. My anxiety was so bad that I was on medication for it and for depression. No one, including me, connected that maybe I was anxious and depressed because I was in an abusive marriage. It was an exhausting way to live, and now that I'm no longer with him, it's hard to believe that I lived like that for as long as I did. Maureen. I met Scott through a friend, and after a few text messages, he began calling me babe and hun. Part of me liked the attention and felt flattered that he was calling me pet names. It made me feel close to him. He began dropping hints that he needed to talk to me throughout the day and before he went to bed. At first it was kind of romantic, but I had a bunch of internal alarms going off the whole time. He had told me that his ex-girlfriend had filed fake domestic violence and stalking charges against him, and that he had issues with trusting women. I didn't want to be another woman who hurt him, so I brushed aside all my concerns and tried to convince myself that all his attention was romantic and that I must have issues. The more time went on, the more demanding and insistent he became. I finally broke up with him because I couldn't handle how needy and demanding he was. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if his ex's charges against him were legitimate. Savannah. Intimacy versus intensity. Intimacy. Intimacy is a feeling of appropriate closeness and togetherness with another person. True intimacy happens over time, during which both people are open, honest, and sincere in their interactions with each other. True intimacy grows over time and is forged through getting to know another person for who they really are in each moment, not who you think they are or who you hope they'll eventually be. When intimacy is developed based on a person misrepresenting themselves, or when we fall in love with who we hope they can become, this isn't intimacy, this is falling in love with an illusion. Intensity. Intensity and emotional manipulators often go hand in hand. Both the highs and lows are severe, the good times being really good and the bad times being really bad. Or there are very few good times and a lot of intense bad times. When the good times are really good, they are often full of future faking, love bombing, intense mirroring, amazing conversations that last for hours, rushing intimacy, and them overall being the perfect partner with a deep soulmate connection. Things feel so perfect, almost like a fairy tale, or that they've won the relationship lottery. When the bad times are bad, they're full of lying, cheating, ongoing affairs, stealing or mishandling joint finances, yelling, name-calling, controlling and irrational demands, double lives, intimidating or violent behavior. Both the makeups and the breakups are intense, and this intensity during the makeups that include love bombing, future faking, and promise or even actions toward change are often understandably confused for sincerity because the emotional manipulator seems so sincere, like this time they really will change. Because most normal people mean what they say and say what they mean, it's hard for them to wrap their mind around the idea that other people don't do this, especially if there is so much on the line, like their marriage or their relationship with their children, or if there is seemingly no reason to lie or manipulate. Emotional manipulators use emotions because they either want or need to in order to get what they want, because they feel somehow entitled to, or if they are sadistic, because it's fun. New story. I was attracted to how intense and certain he was about everything, including wanting to date me. Right off the bat, he was in full pursuit of me and told me everything a woman would want to hear. I was very quick to trust him and to sleep with him, thinking that we had this great connection. After we slept together, he stopped texting like he normally did, and I realized that he never wanted a relationship. He was just looking for sex. I felt so foolish and used. April. Treating others how we'd like to be treated versus treating others according to how they are behaving. Treating others how we'd like to be treated. Emotional manipulators often manipulate not only their target's emotions, but the emotions of those around their target. They can and do manipulate everyone into thinking they are the victim, and that their target is the problem. This level of manipulation takes a dangerous and new low if a target is religious, as spiritual texts are often twisted into becoming extensions of power and control for the abusive person. The golden rule of treating others how we would want to be treated is often skewed to push the target into staying in an abusive situation, because if we treat others how we'd like to be treated, then odds are this would mean we would want to be treated fairly and with dignity, compassion, in a way that is respectful, and that we'd want to be given another chance if we've done something hurtful to someone else. The part about being given another chance is often continually twisted by both the abuser and the target. If giving a person another chance puts you or your children in harm's way, then this isn't the golden rule. This is a manipulation. Treating others according to how they are behaving. Treating others how we'd like to be treated doesn't mean that we need to or should let go of having healthy boundaries or deal-breaker behavior for those who hurt us. It doesn't mean that we need to allow a person open access to our lives when they've had hurtful or harmful behavior, either towards us or that impacts us or even impacts others. What it does mean is that we treat people based on a fair and reasonable way if we had done the same thing they did. And it's never reasonable to continue to put yourself or your children in harm's way. News story. Oh, the golden rule. My father would continually use this against me, claiming that I was a hypocrite, didn't know the value of family, and didn't honor God because I wasn't treating him like I'd want to be treated. What he really meant was that he wanted me to continually turn the other cheek and let him keep getting away with hurting me. The reality was that I would never treat people like how he treated me, and if I did, I would realize that there are consequences. Kevin. My new understanding of the golden rule is do unto yourself as you would do unto others, meaning treat yourself as good as you treat others. For years I had treated everyone else much better than I treated myself because I thought to treat myself good, or even to take my wants, needs, or feelings into consideration, meant that I was somehow greedy or selfish. I now realize that I matter, and that I am worthy of treating myself with dignity and respect, and that my wants, needs, and feelings matter. If I'm treating others in a way that puts me at harm, then there is something wrong, and I know now that I need to not do this. Lucy. Nobody is perfect versus tolerating abusive behavior. Nobody is perfect. Many partners of abusive people justify the abuse to themselves with a rationalization that nobody is perfect. And while this is true, nobody is perfect, it doesn't mean that being used, abused, exploited, or neglected is somehow okay. It's a reasonable expectation for you to be treated with dignity and respect, and to not be abused, lied to, cheated on, or dragged through hell by a person who is supposed to be on the same team as you. Tolerating abusive behavior. Abusive behavior isn't a mistake, and it's not an anger issue. It's intentional behavior that's driven by power and control, and worse, the abusive person often, if not always, feels justified in their abusive treatment of those around them. Tolerating abusive behavior because the abuser is a friend, co-worker, spouse, or family member is to be held emotionally and generally financially and physically hostage every single day. This means you have to walk on eggshells and continually try to read the abuser's mind and anticipate their mood. If a person has behavior that includes them being abusive, having active addictions, or committing adultery, then this is a big problem. It is a mistake to use the defense of nobody is perfect with any of these things and to think that this relationship is workable. In order for a relationship to work, there needs to be two emotionally available, committed, and present people. If one person isn't ready, willing, or able to be emotionally invested in a relationship, then no relationship is possible. And don't confuse the relationship continuing with the relationship working. Lots of people have stayed in one-sided relationships full of abuse, addiction, and adultery for decades. This isn't something to celebrate or to use as a model of an ideal relationship. News story. Whenever I would confront my ex about something, usually another woman, I'd catch him texting, or if I tried to explain how he hurt my feelings, he'd spin things around and blame me, and then accuse me of thinking I was perfect. What started out as a conversation would quickly escalate to an argument with the focus on me and everything I did wrong. I can't believe how twisted and turned around my thinking was when I was with him. He really had me thinking all his abuse and cheating was my fault, and then he tried to make me feel guilty, like I was the problem whenever I tried to hold him accountable. Tiffany. My parents were married for 34 years when my father died. My father was an alcoholic and a rageaholic. I used to think this level of commitment at all costs was what a real relationship was all about, and I thought my mother was a saint for putting up with him. I also used to justify his abuse because he had an abusive childhood. I now realize that there is no excuse for abuse, and that my mother wasn't a saint for putting up with him. She was scared of being alone, and lived in fear of what he'd do to her and to himself if she left. I didn't realize that they had an abusive or dysfunctional relationship until I got out of my own abusive relationship and began going to therapy. That's when I learned about boundaries, standards, and deal breakers, and that I didn't have any. I realized that I was using my parents' relationship as a template for my own, and if I wanted to break the cycle, then I needed to get a new template. I slowly began to realize that my parents didn't have a relationship. They had an unspoken understanding. Basically, that my dad was going to do whatever he felt like, and that my mom was going to put up with it, even if that meant him destroying her emotionally. What breaks my heart is that she thought this was love. Laura. Being judgmental versus being discerning. Being judgmental. Being judgmental is often viewed in a negative way when one person has an attitude of moral superiority over someone else or others by declaring themselves right or good and the other person as wrong or bad. Many targets continue to keep problematic people in their life because they feel harsh by drawing a line in the sand for what they won't tolerate. You don't necessarily have to judge other people. You can leave that up to the court system or your understanding of God. But it is, however, important that you are being the judge of what is right or wrong, or acceptable and unacceptable for you and for your life. It's very important that we all have a clear idea of what's acceptable and unacceptable in our lives, especially when it comes to how we are treated by those in our inner circle. Narcissists will often protest that their target is being judgmental of them when the target brings up any issue they have with their behavior or tries to set a boundary. They will often throw out the "you're being judgmental" card in an effort to manipulate their target using guilt or obligation, especially if their target is religious. An emotional manipulator will not be okay with you having boundaries, so it's important that you realize that they will throw out every trick in the book to manipulate you in order for them to continue getting their way. And these manipulations tend to escalate until their target caves in and gives them what they want. For the record, having standards for how you are treated and cutting destructive people out of your life isn't being judgmental. It's important and necessary if you want to have peace in your life. Being discerning. Being discerning means to know ourselves well enough to discern what is workable and what we consider deal-breaker behavior for how we are treated, or for other situations in general. Having a level of discernment for what we will and won't tolerate is important, so that we can assess our situations accurately and respond accordingly. Discernment isn't about morally judging others. It's about making healthy and empowering decisions for ourselves, regardless of what others think we should do. News story. I kept many of the wrong people in my life for way too long, because I felt judgmental for having boundaries and trying to cut them out. My ex and my father were the two abusive people in my life, and they would both tell me that God was the only one who could judge them. I was continually pushed into forgiving them and keeping them in my life by people in our church, as well as other family members. I now realize that I have the right to be discerning and to choose who is in my life, and I no longer keep abusive or manipulative people in my life. That might sound harsh to some people, but I want peace in my life from here on out. Carla. Unhealthy narcissism versus healthy narcissism. Unhealthy narcissism. Unhealthy narcissism is what most people mean when they are talking about narcissism in general, whether they are referring to a person who is narcissistic or to an extreme narcissistic personality disorder. When most people use the term narcissistic or narcissist, they are usually referring to a person who is self-centered to a problematic degree. While that is part of the problematic behavior that makes up narcissistic behavior, it's not just that the person is full of themselves. It's that because they are so full of themselves, they have no room for anyone else. In other words, they are so focused on their wants and needs that they are not emotionally available to nurture or empower those in their inner circle. They are all about themselves all of the time, at the expense of others. I think it's helpful to view narcissism in terms of a person's self-orientation, or of them understanding themselves and their place in the world. Our self-orientation is on a spectrum ranging from healthy narcissism, which would be where healthy self-esteem falls. This mindset is where a person believes that they are worthy of having goals and have faith in their abilities to achieve them, while understanding that they will be continually learning and growing along the way. This is an I can do it, or why not me type mentality. Where this mindset starts to become problematic is when it starts to become more of an it's all about me, or it's all about me at the expense of you type mentality. Having a relationship with someone who is so self-absorbed, selfish, and entitled will not work because they have no emotional understanding or capacity to work as a team. Context is key in understanding this spectrum of narcissism, as there is a time and a place for some degrees for all these types of behaviors. If a person is playing sports or is competitive in business, they will most likely take on the attitude of me versus you, and that's okay to a reasonable degree within that context. However, the attitude of me versus you is a problem if they view themselves in unnecessary competition with their spouse or children or others that are on their same team. But if a spouse is abusive, then it's important for the other spouse to realize that while they may be married and should be on the same team, that once abuse enters into the dynamic, they are not on the same team, and they need to take defensive action. Leave if they can, get an attorney, develop an escape plan, etc. When targets of abuse start developing boundaries, they often feel selfish, as though they are being mean to others by putting themselves first. Having boundaries with someone isn't being mean or controlling. It's making ourselves a priority and realizing that our wants and needs are important too, and that we weren't put on this earth to be mistreated or to serve them. Keep in mind that while we weren't meant to be mistreated, other people, especially those who are used to you always saying yes or giving in, will exclaim that you are mean or selfish for not letting them continue to mistreat you. So prepare yourself emotionally for this. It encompasses several different components, but mainly it is when a person is so motivated by their own desires that, at a minimum, they emotionally or physically starve out or suck energy from those around them, because their wants and needs come first, and they do so by using, abusing, exploiting, or neglecting others. The vast majority of people who are caught up in addiction would be considered to have narcissistic behavior, because feeding that addiction tends to be at the forefront of their mind, even if it means destroying their marriage or family to get it fed. Healthy narcissism. Healthy narcissism is a psychological term that describes a person having the self-confidence and self-esteem to believe that they can set and achieve their goals, even if, or perhaps especially if, others don't understand or support their vision. A person with healthy narcissism believes in themselves and in their ability to figure things out and to move forward. They don't have an attitude of superiority or unnecessary competition. Healthy narcissism is the attitude of why not me? And it's the belief that a person is worthy of setting goals and obtaining them without feeling that they need to tear everyone else down around them in order for that to happen. News story. The concept of healthy narcissism was a game changer for me. I had heard of narcissism before, and I thought any type of big plans or goals or putting myself first was a bad thing. I didn't want to be a narcissist like my mother, and so I continually put myself last as a way to prevent that from happening. I didn't realize that my putting everyone else first was also a problem, and I didn't realize that it was normal and healthy to have goals, as my mother was always cutting me down and telling me why I'd never succeed. I'm now working on building healthy self-esteem and self-worth. Heather. Self-love versus selfishness. Self-love. Self-love is when a person treats themselves with dignity, respect, and value, which includes having healthy boundaries with others, making their time, safety, and sanity a priority, and realizing that their wants and needs do matter. Self-love is best seen by how a person treats themselves, how they treat others, and how they allow others to treat them. Selfishness. Selfishness, unhealthy narcissism, is the attitude of a person getting their needs and wants met at the expense of others, which often includes them using, abusing, exploiting, or neglecting those in their inner circle. Selfishness is an attitude that a person should be able to do what they want, when they want, as much as they want, and be allowed to get away with it, all because it makes them happy, regardless of who it hurts. Let me be clear. Setting boundaries with problematic or abusive people is not being selfish. It is self-protection, which is a form of self-love. Cutting off contact with problematic or abusive people is not being selfish. It is self-protection, which is a form of self-love. Refusing to reopen contact or to help an abusive person because they need you or because their children or animals need you isn't selfish. It is self-protection, which is a form of self-love. Fighting for full custody because the other parent is hurting the children isn't selfish. It's trying to protect your children and is an act of love for your child. Limiting or cutting off contact with a family member who has abused your children isn't selfish. It's being protective and acting loving toward your child. New story. I always thought that the idea of self-love was narcissistic and thought continually putting others ahead of myself was the right thing to do and what love looked like in motion. I thought that was healthy, and it wasn't. I didn't realize that I was neglecting myself, putting all the wrong people first, and then resenting them because I was always there for them. This whole experience has been very eye-opening, and I'm now on the path to finding more balance in my life and making myself a priority. Amy.